the Danish physicians were murdered by the Germans in a ratio 110 times their proportional share of the general Danish population. And why was that? The head of the Gestapo in Denmark said, in no other country have the physicians been as active in illegal underground activity against us as in Denmark. So he knew that if they randomly killed a doctor, they would have most probably have eliminated an adversary. Especially remarkable was the medical community's role in the rescue of the Danish Jewry. This is a sentence that goes with me wherever I present this, because it says it all. I wanted to investigate whether it's possible to define factors of professional, educational, cultural, or social nature that preconditioned the Danish physicians to behave in this exceptional manner during the period of the German occupation. Just a few words on the historical background. Why was Denmark occupied at all? Because it should just serve as a stepping stone towards Germany's main target, which was Norway. And so on April the 9th, 1940, at 4:15 in the morning, Germany occupied Denmark. It took exactly 105 minutes from the H hour to the surrender. And now a utopian creature in German, friedliche Besetzung, peaceful occupation, was born. The official Danish-German interface was of pure diplomatic character. There was no war between Denmark and Germany. A tacit understanding existed that the Danish Jewry would remain unharmed for the time being, not even touched by discriminating legislation. The first breach in the official German-Danish relations occurred within the context of the so-called telegram crisis, October-November 1942. The German representative was recalled to Berlin, replaced with a high-ranking Nazi hardliner SS-Gruppenführer Werner Best, Dr. Werner Best, who very interestingly enough, did not undertake any heavy-handed actions in Denmark. But there was a turning point. That's the 29th of August, 43. Increasing incidents of civil disobedience, strikes, violent demonstrations, increasing actions of sabotage, in many cases supported by the Allies, and it had become evident in late 43 that Germany was not going to win the war. So this led to severe countermeasures by the Germans, and there was a climax on August the 28th. The Danish government refused to accept the conditions of an ultimatum, which included a demand for death penalty for saboteurs. The Germans proclaimed martial law in Denmark, and the government resigned. This signaled the disappearance of the barrier that had existed until then between the Danish Jewry and the German final solution. Werner Best sent a telegram to Ribbentrop, his boss. It is my opinion that measures should now be taken toward a solution of the problem of the Jews. A German attaché in Denmark took upon himself to notify Danish politicians about the impending action, and they in turn warned the leaders of the Jewish community. As a result of the combination of the deliberately unenthusiastic effort by most of the Germans and the spontaneous rescue activity by the Danes, only about 480 Jews out of 7,500 were apprehended and sent to the concentration camp of Theresienstadt. About the physicians. We found 428 physicians, which is 12.5% of all the physicians in Denmark. In addition, 177 students of medicine who were active in the resistance. 22 physicians and 6 students were killed as a direct or indirect result of their undertakings in the resistance. For the purpose of my research, the physicians and students were classified according to the degree of hazard inherent to their activity. They performed various leadership functions, ranging from group leaders to leaders of local committees until the very top, the Freedom Council, In the Freedom Council, there were 3 professors of medicine, 20% of the council. They did printing and distribution of illegal media. They assisted fugitives from Germans. They organized escape routes. And they were frontliners, which means they were receiving and distributing weapons and explosives. They did sabotage. They participated in the underground army that was established in Denmark towards the end of the war. And the ones that escaped to Sweden, they participated in the so-called Danish brigade, a force of 5,000 Danish citizens that was established in Sweden. Now, the important point of the rescue of the Danish Jews. In my study, I found that between 50 and 65%, in other words, more than half of the Danish Jews who were rescued passed through one of the medical channels, a doctor, a hospital. And first and foremost of the medical institution, there was one hospital called Bispebjerg Hospital, for who understands Danish. And approximately 2,000 Jews passed through this rescue operation. And I want just to mention one incident that took place in the hectic days of October when the Jews were rescued. Emergency. A group of Jews were ready to be transported to the coast. The skippers and taxi drivers were waiting impatiently, had to be paid, and the cash drawer in the emergency fund was empty. Dr. Köster, who was the chief organizer, took an almost unthinkable decision. He called upon 2 of his most trusted nurses, sent them to the palace where King Christian was held in respectful house arrest by the Germans, and in his report published in 1946, 5 words. And they were not disappointed, which means the ailing monarch took money out of his pocket and gave it to 2 to him unknown nurses carrying a request from an anonymous young surgeon in order to save a number of his Jewish subjects, not because they were Jews. They were his Danish subjects. Now, for the purpose of this research, the physicians and students were grouped separately in 3 main categories. We have group 1, includes all the individuals participating in the resistance. Group 2 are the activists, individuals who were associated on a regular and organized basis. They were included, of course, in group 1. And group 3 were the fighters, the one who was in a steady danger of being apprehended, killed, executed, whatever. They are included in 2 and 1, of course. Now, the relative percentage was calculated of 1, individuals with at least 1 parent being physician, individuals with at least 1 parent being physician, educator, or priest, P-E-T, T for theologist, and individuals with parents being socially classified as higher middle class and up, we call it M-class plus, and also individuals who pass their final exam with high marks, the 2 highest marks possible. We had a control group, and also just to compare with a group of 21 Danish physicians who were members of the Danish Nazi Party or volunteered for the SS, which is even worse. Now, this prominent participation of the Danish physicians cannot be attributed to one single factor. A combination of circumstances played together and created the motivation behind the actions of the medical men in the Danish resistance movement. And I propose that a combination of mindset and means constituted the driving force for their representation in the resistance organization. I also propose that 3 main factors of environmental nature influencing the mindset, or should we call it the personal value system, were essential to the motivation. Now, in the analysis of the data, I applied the theory of basic human values by Shalom Schwartz, the distinguished Israeli social psychologist and cross-cultural researcher. This is the model that I propose for the study. The three environmental factors, the influence on the person through a filter. The filter is his inherent personality traits, which are inherited, and the activation of his value system happens when he gets a stimulus, and he will then react in accordance with his value system.
Dan, can you wait? We can't read. Can you read it?
Ah, I know what's written there.
It's a surprise.
It's a surprise. Anyway, you have the cultural values, the group values, professional, and the upbringing, education. This is personal traits inherited, the personal values. You have a stimulus, and the person will act in accordance with his personal values. A few words on each of the values. The cultural values. During the period between the two world wars, Denmark had concentrated its national effort and resources in the direction of creating a model welfare. Lene Yachil, in her cornerstone work on the rescue of Danish Jewry, said that equality of rights, freedom, the rights assured to every Dane, as laid down in the Constitution, are valid for all citizens without exception. And Schwartz, in his stating in his concept of culture, regards it as having influence upon individual beliefs, action, goals, and thinking through the expectation to which people are exposed. The actions of the Danish physician must naturally be observed against the backdrop of the cultural values of the Danish. But as they joined the various organizations earlier and in relatively the greatest number than other professional groups, there must have been other factors. And if we look at the group values, maybe I'll just skip the group values in order to save some time, and let's talk about the upbringing values, which is the most important. Most research on the development of personal values view those as cognitive structures learned through a process of identification with important others in one's life. 58% of the individuals in the control group of 100 randomly selected physicians were raised in higher middle class and above. But in the entire group of physicians participating in resistance, there was an increase of 24%. And in the fighter group, the increase was 50%. The prevalence of physicians and students of medicine in resistance with roots in families where one or both of the parents were physicians, that is really striking. We'll go back to this one. I don't know if you can see the numbers. If not, you'll have to accept my word for it. The increase over the control group was 15% for the physicians, 23% for the medical students, but in the fighter category, the students' number increased 245%. We'll see the same tendency in the other groups. So, the other factor was the means. The physicians possessed the objective means that enabled them to contribute a significant effort. They had cars, they had gas rations, they had permits to drive at all hours of the day and night in order to visit their patients. The country doctor had a large house with a cellar where he could hide weapons and whatever. The doctors in the larger hospitals in the cities could hospitalize people with cooked up diagnoses, with Danish names, and the patient could be hidden away, psychiatric ward, isolation, dangerous communicable disease, and they had ambulances and funeral hearses to their disposition. The conclusion I reached was that the Danish physician and students of medicine gained their prominent representation in virtually all areas of resistance activity, including an instrumental and vital role in the rescue of Danish Jewry, because they were motivated by their mindset and assisted by physical means at their disposition. My research has analyzed the psychological and sociological factors influencing the personal value system of the Danish physicians and students of medicine, which eventually was dominating by values leading to pro-social and altruistic behavior, values that had been internalized from the environment of their upbringing as well as from the group values of their professional society, and eventually from the cultural values of the Danish nation as a whole. And if you will permit me a short postscriptum, the undertaking of this research should be seen as a humble expression of gratitude by a once 2-year-old boy standing crying and terrified on the deck of a small fishing boat in the freezing night of October the 8th, 43. Gratitude towards the valiant member of the Danish resistance who organized the escape of that little boy and his parents. That boy became me. Thank you.